But the younger generation now have grown up with the idea that masculinity itself is toxic. And we have a huge amount of work to do to come against that and say, no, sin is toxic. Their manhood is not in and of itself a problem. It's designed by God for his glory.
Welcome to the Courageous Men Podcast, where we help Christian men follow God faithfully, love their families well, and build a legacy that lasts. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
Welcome back to the Courageous Men Podcast. Our guest today has spent over 2 decades calling men back to what truly matters. His name is Mike Young. He's a founder of Noble Warriors. He's helped shape, churches across the country around, moving beyond just surface level men's ministries and actually discipling men, to walk closely with Christ and lead well at home. Years ago, Mike made a significant shift. He stepping out of his roles in education and in family construction, to follow a clear calling into full-time ministry of men. That step of obedience has now impacted thousands of men and families and leaders. He's also the husband, father of 4, now a grandfather. And what he teaches isn't just theory. It's something he's lived out in his own home. I'm so grateful for this conversation. I know you are going to be so encouraged today by the conversation with Mike. Mike, welcome to the show. Honored to have you on.
Well, Whitney, thanks so much for inviting me. It's great to meet you and great to be part of your podcast. Good to be with you, friend.
Yeah, the more I've looked into your material and learned about you, I'm really excited for you to be here and to speak to the men listening. I love that, you've said that Jesus is the standard for manhood.
Right.
I may start using that if that's okay, because I love that statement. I want to ask you, maybe, was there a season and maybe where your understanding of manhood had to be reshaped to that?
Yeah, actually, probably a couple of iterations. Most notably, when Stacy and I first got married, we went to visit a friend of hers who had recently gotten married up in Detroit. Stacy and I got married, and we went it was just the two of us up to visit a friend, and he introduced me. Gordon was his name. He said, Mike, a guy gave me this book, and it shaped what I understand about being a husband and father as a Christian man. The book was Point Man. It was been written by Steve Farrar. Don't know if you're familiar with that, but I came home, grabbed a copy of that, read it, and it gave me tremendous clarity about what it looked like to be a Christian husband and father in the pattern of Jesus Christ, in the way that he loved the church. So that was one iteration. And I grew up in a Christian home, but I often say that my dad got a lot of things right, maybe serendipitously. God just poured out favor and grace on my dad as he invested in me and our family. And so he didn't have formal training in this, but boy, that book crystallized some things for me. And then the next, and I was serving in the church and leading our family through all of this. But then when our sons were born, Stacy gave me a book for Father's Day one time, and it was Raising a Modern Day Knight by Robert Lewis. And so, man, I read that book, and it really began to shape what it looked like for me to be a man who raised men. And both of those, Robert Lewis and Steve Farrar, discipled me from the pages of their books. And then I've had other guys along the way. Carrie Bates invested in me as a one-on-one discipler. He was a pastor of a church we were at. But all of those things just kept giving me incremental growth in my understanding that Jesus is our model. And he's not only a model for us in Christian living, but clearly a model for manhood. And it just helped me multiple times along the way.
Yes, love that. And the Raising a Modern Day Knight, yeah, I've read that, and I highly recommend that book. That motivated me in so many ways to raise my sons, to be men, and I love that book. But yeah, I'm gonna look the other one up as well. I know the listeners will too. But when you look at the culture today, Mike, where do you see some of the biggest, say, confusion around what it means to be a man?
Well, I spend an awful lot of time talking about this, thinking about it, praying about it. And here's one of the unique scenarios right now. Any young man who's, let's say, under 25, for most of his aware life, has heard the word toxic in front of masculinity.
Mm.
And so that, for some of us older folks, we remember when that, those two words started going together. But the younger generation now have grown up with the idea that masculinity itself is toxic. And we have a huge amount of work to do to come against that and say, no, sin is toxic. Satan has a plan to steal and kill and destroy, but God has a plan for abundant life, and abundant life for men and women, but abundant life for men to know who they are and what they're about and what they're created for. And we just have a tremendous amount of work to do. But instead of look at obstacles, I see opportunity. And I just think that the church has a huge opportunity, especially in the realm of discipling young men, to help them understand that they were designed to love and to lead on purpose for specific reasons. And their manhood is not in and of itself a problem. It's designed by God for his glory, and it needs to be employed as such. And so there's a lot of work to do to accomplish that, but the young men are waiting for us to help them with that.
Yes. Oh, I love that thinking. The young men are waiting. They don't even know it, but they are,
Yeah,
right?
they're looking for something.
Yes, yes. And when you look at Jesus, what are some of those qualities maybe that are often overlooked or misunderstood that for a man, right? That some of the qualities of Jesus's life.
Yeah, well, I often say, and this could go in a lot of directions, but the first thing that comes to my mind is just in my role as a guy whose primary responsibility in life is to help churches disciple men. I often say that both Jesus and Paul cast a model for us in the fact that they ministered broadly to the community in counterculturally shocking ways. They cared for women and outcast and the broken, the unclean, the just children. Jesus especially, bring the young children to me. He cared for women in unusual ways that were shocking to the culture. And so we need to follow that example. But the thing that we miss so frequently is that both Jesus and Paul invested deeply in a few men who would carry on their ministry beyond them. As a matter of fact, there's a book called The Master Plan of Evangelism by Robert Coleman. The opening section of that book is titled Men Were His Method. And part of what Coleman says in that book is that Jesus grew less concerned about the masses who were following him and more concerned throughout his ministry with the men who would lead the masses after his departure. And so we spend a huge amount of time in the world of ministry investing in the masses, thinking that that's going to produce the desired effect. But the model that Jesus gave us is to minister broadly and disciple deeply, to make deep investments in a few men. And I wish that more men would lean into the glory of investing in a few other men and walking with them to maturity in Christ. So that's one of the things that I love. I mean, I could rattle on about, different things that he did, the way he confronted the Pharisees, the way he was kind to people who no one else would be kind to. There's plenty there, but the hallmark for me is that he invested in a few men to perpetuate the legacy and build the church.
I love that because man, that's a long-term perspective there too, right? Investing
Right.
in a few that are going to go and invest in others, and being that model for that. Where we could say so many things about Christ personally, but that's one thing that I bet is often not mentioned
Right.
in that capacity. And maybe to break this down a little further, a man that's listening that says, okay, that makes sense, that Christ is our model. Maybe give them some first steps they could take
Yeah.
to start to follow Christ as their model.
Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is something that we have already brushed on a little bit. That book, Raising a Modern Day Knight, set into motion for me some real clarity about what it looked like to raise up godly men. And so I often remind men that your first ministry responsibility is not outside your home, it's inside your home. And so I'm constantly encouraging men to think about what does it look like for you to truly be the spiritual leader, the discipler of men and women, but to take that responsibility seriously in your home. Because quite honestly, you're going to give an account for it, whether you believe it or not, or whether you want to or not. But you are leading your home spiritually, and it would be well for you to invest in discipling your family. Now, some guys, and boy, I can go further and further with this. Some guys would say, well, my kids are gone like mine are. We've got 4 kids, and our youngest daughter graduates from nursing school in just a few weeks, and she'll be moving to another state. But I am still, by God's grace and his favor, having opportunity to invest in my sons. And so even if you didn't do that well when they were under your roof, you can invest in and disciple and pray for your sons and your daughters even now. I'm a grandfather as well. We may talk about that, but some folks will talk about how great it is to be a grandparent. My favorite part of being a grandfather is watching my son be a dad,
Oh, I
because the
love that.
things that he saw happen in our home, man, he's doing it better than I did because he's smarter than I am, and he's got more tools than I did, but he is investing in his kids. So start there, but then look beyond. And I get so frustrated with some guys who say, well, I want to, I need a small group of 5 or 6 or 12 or whatever. They have this number. Well, dude, start with one. Find a guy who will meet with you on a regular basis. Jump into Point Man or Raising a Modern Day Knight. Find a resource. Read the book of James together and just begin to do life together with another man, engaging the word, and watch the Lord use that. And I'll tell you, guys, you will do that thinking you're blessing another man. You will be the better blessed in that environment. You will find that it is giving you a renewed and a fresh sense of what it means to walk with Christ and lead well as you begin to invest in others. And where you think you're blessing someone else, friend, you will have the better blessing there.
This is so good. Yeah, I was just talking even this weekend about the importance of accountability, right? And having other
Yep.
men surrounding you, and the verse, when one falls, woe to the one, right? When he's by himself, right? There's no one
Yeah.
there to pick him up, and because yeah, we all need other brothers around us, right? That are going to call us out and ask hard questions and those things. So, Mike, I know you've worked with men for over 20 years. And I wonder, what maybe patterns you've seen, of maybe the men who actually grow versus the ones who actually stay stuck.
Oh, that's a great question. So I just spoke at a conference this past weekend and did a workshop on this. And here's one of the things: we spend an awful lot of time chasing guys who aren't ready to get caught. And so we have our sights set on a particular guy or a particular strategy. And what you need to do is pay attention to the guy who's already leaning into you, who's hanging around. I heard a guy talk about this one time. It was actually Robert Coleman. I heard him speak about this, and he said, you will find that when you are open to investing in young men in particular, there are young men who will begin to orbit you, kind of like an electron orbits the nucleus of an atom. And don't be worried about the people who aren't close. Invest in the guys who are close and be willing to start there. There's usually some guy who's leaning in, and you just need to ask the Lord to give you eyes to see and ears to hear who is the guy who's close by that I can lean into and I can begin to invest in. And it may not be the guy that you had hoped for. It may not be the guy that you think is going to be the high impact guy, but I got to tell you, no one in his right mind would have chosen Peter, because no one would have seen the potential in Peter that Jesus saw. And so I often talk to seminary students about the fact that they live in this academic environment, and they're so used to thinking about finding guys like Paul, but most of those guys are going to go pastor churches full of Peters, full of guys who aren't very polished, but can get things done. And so look for a guy who's leaning in and just ask that guy, can I take you out for a cup of coffee or a meal? And I'll give you, Whitney, you asked me about a starting point. Guys will say, well, how do I start a conversation? Well, let me give you 4 questions. You could ask these 4 questions to nearly any guy or girl and have an hour-long conversation. I'm convinced of that. If you ask a guy, what's heavy? What's hard? What hurts? How can I help you? What's heavy? What's hard? What hurts? How can I help? Man, every guy's got something that's heavy in his life. Every guy's got something that's hard that he's dealing with. Every guy's got something that's causing him some pain. And if you're willing to help and you're sincere about that, every guy's got something. He'll tell you, if you could pray for me for that. So if your help is nothing more than praying, then you're doing the most important work that you can do to help someone.
Man, that's gold right there. Heavy, hard, hurts, and help. As I'm thinking about different conversations I've had with young men, right? That is so good. And I know that as you've led Noble Warriors for 20 years
Yes,
now,
sir.
and you're equipping churches, right? Which I love. But speak to maybe what role the local church has or community should play in the growth of that man.
Yeah. I just honestly, I wish more churches were focused on truly discipling men rather than holding events for men. We do an awful lot of what I call cul-de-sac ministry, and most of us have been to a kid's birthday party or some neighborhood bash in a cul-de-sac because there's not much traffic there. So we go there. There's a bounce house for the kids. We have some hot dogs and some popcorn, cotton candy, whatever. But generally, we go back out the same way we came because that's the only path. The path that we came in is the path that we're going to take out. And so part of what I see as the responsibility of the church is, yes, do events for men, but every event should be intentionally and strategically planned with a right next step for what do guys do next. And I'm constantly challenging churches to do fewer events with greater purpose because you've spent more time planning the what's next than you've spent planning the what's now. And I realized that, depending upon the size of the church, getting 50 or 100 or 500 guys to come to a big event feels like you're doing a lot. You're really not doing much unless you move some of those guys to a right next step of some sort of discipleship process and helping them understand what it looks like to walk with Jesus and lead well. And that's where I think many churches could do a much better job. We could do fewer big events and more intentionally focused a weekly engagement for short cycles. Now, here's another thing. Churches will tell me, hey, we're going to start a men's Bible study on Thursday mornings, and it's just going to go on forever. And I'll say, well, you'll start out with 20 guys, and then it'll drift down to 12, and then you'll end up with about 6 or 5 that come all the time because they're the people who have marginal time. But guys are used to working in seasons. And so if you'll do a 12-week series on biblical manhood or marriage for men or something, and because guys want to know when it starts, but they also want to know when it ends. So if you will begin to do things in what I call a campaign for men, then you can begin to see some movement. And some of those guys will continue meeting together because you've established a pattern for them. And so this is part of the strategic conversations that I do in workshops with churches all over the place to help them understand, how do I move from just attractive men's events to effective men's campaigns that truly move toward discipleship.
That makes so much sense to me because I can see more men staying to the 12th meeting if they know there's only 12,
Right.
versus if it's just like, it's going on
Yeah, this
forever.
never ends.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I think I've heard you say, maybe in a different setting, something about, you emphasizing systems over events and some of that. And, maybe could you highlight a few of maybe that a church that's listening or pastor that's listening that they should consider as they're thinking about doing that next men's event?
Yeah, so I think it's awesome to have whatever you do for your men that gets everyone there. Guys do men's Olympics and barbecue cooking contest, cornhole. I mean, whatever you want to do. Um, there are plenty of what I call catalytic events, and if you want a book that kind of outlines this in a more complex way, with some real intensity, there's a book written by guys at Man in the Mirror called No Man Left Behind. And that's a fantastic resource. So a lot of what I talk about is just my adaptation of that. But you can plan for a men's event where someone's going to speak and give some direction, maybe talk on a specific topic. But what you want to do at that event is be planning to launch small groups who are going to walk through the book Point Man, or who are going to walk through a video series like Better Man, which is another fantastic tool that I'm a champion for. Or that we're just going to start a Bible study on the book of James. And I'll tell you, I'll just stop here and say I love James because it's so practical for guys, and you can see the end from the beginning. Guys, really don't start in Romans with your guys. I mean, you want to get them there. I'm 100% on board for guys studying Romans, so don't hear this wrongly. But the typical guy is not ready for a deep dive in Romans. He needs something that he can get his hands around and apply to his life. And so James really helps. It's a great tool for that, or First and Second Timothy. And so they're great resources for that. It's part of how we help churches. But what you want to do is launch those groups and announce them at the major event. So Bill's leading a group on Thursday morning. Frank's leading a group at his fire pit on Saturday nights at 9:30. Frank's going to have the young dads that are going to meet at McDonald's at 9 o'clock on Monday nights after they put their kids to bed. So you can popcorn that around the community, decentralize it, but let guys know that you make a commitment today for the next 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks. This is what we're going to expose you to. This is how we're going to help you change what's going on in your home and your life. And if you want to keep going after that, we'll give you some next steps. But we're launching tonight. Now, not everyone's going to do that, but if 30% of the guys who come to your cornhole contest and your chili cook-off end up, if it's 100 guys show up and you get 30 guys in new small groups, that's a huge win.
That is a huge win right there. Wow. I want to, I know men were probably wondering earlier when you were talking about some of these things from Raising Modern Day Night, or maybe it was Point Man, some of those books and things that maybe you implemented or things you've learned about, raising a son, as a father listening. I want you to excite them a little bit about, hey, think through some of these things that are you should
Yeah.
consider as you're raising your boy to be a man.
Wow. You'll get me stirred up here. So we have three sons. Oldest is married, has two sons, and another baby that'll be born in the next couple of weeks. The middle one gets married in 2.5 weeks. The youngest one is married, came back from the mission field, and is now got a baby due in September. And so I took each of our guys through a series of milestones. You've read it, Raising a Modern Day Night. And what I love about Robert's work there is he told you about his pattern, but he didn't say, do it my way. He said, figure out your way. So I'll tell you our way. So in the summer before our kids started middle school, I took each of them on a camping trip, one-on-one camping trip. We went up into the mountains and we memorized Romans 12:2. They were getting ready to go into middle school. Romans, and the peer pressure ramps up in middle school. So we memorized together, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So we memorized that together. I had the sex talk with them, which at this point I think was too late. But at any rate, we did all that. Man, shot guns, did fun stuff. But I gave each of them dog tags that they wore with that verse on it. And man, my little guys wearing those dog tags around, they thought they were 10 foot tall. So that was what we did before they went into middle school. Before they went into high school, I went with them on an international mission trip. We went, I took all three of my boys and my daughter to Bangladesh and worked with international missionaries overseas so that they got to see true poverty. They were involved in taking the gospel to desolate places. And so that was the second iteration. I had people pray for them while we were overseas, that they would have a big view of God and a small view of the world. When they got ready to leave to go to college, I would read a Bible and mark it up with them in mind. Two of my sons went to military training and could not have anything but a Bible. They couldn't take anything with them other than a Bible. So I had guys who had spoken into their lives gives me verses and notes that would encourage them, and I printed them on labels and stuck them to the Bible so anyone who inspected their stuff could not take it out of the Bible. So they had a Bible that was filled with words from me and words from other godly men. So that was the third space, is before they left to go to college. And then the fourth time is when they get married, and I get to pray over them and commission them as husbands and fathers. And what a privilege that is. Now, we also have a daughter who's marrying a young man that I did not get to raise. And so what a privilege now to go back and do have some of those conversations with him. As a matter of fact, I am the MC at our conferences, and this weekend it was a pretty sweet time because my future son-in-law has come to all three conferences to work with my daughter, to be present there, because this is what we do. It's family ministry. And so he was sitting off to the side in the sanctuary, and during the first session this week, I noticed where he was, and I went and got him, and I said, Cayman, will you come sit with me on the front row, because this is where my sons sit.
Oh, man.
With me.
How precious.
Yeah, so the privilege of being able to invest in a next generation of men, guys, if you're listening to this and this has stirred your heart, it is absolutely worth doing. And there's an old proverb that says the best time to have planted a tree was 20 years ago. So you may wish that you had done some of this stuff years ago, but the next best time to plant a tree, the proverb says, is now. So make up for lost time by just going to your son and saying, hey, I missed some opportunities, but boy, I'd like a do-over, and could I take you out for dinner, or could I spend some time with you and invest in you? Just go back and start again. Go read Raising a Modern Day Knight. I mean, it's a 25-year-old book, 30-year-old book, but it is absolutely valuable even today.
Man, so many great points there about these transitions that your sons went through and how you were intentional there. It just means so much. I love the image you painted too about the dog tags. I have 11 and 12-year-old almost 13, and man, we are there. We are, we are just beginning this. We have been having conversations even this week, beginning this process of just kind of wanting to get him excited about, hey, we're going to go through this process together, and I love I'm going to say it too loud because they're going to hear me, but I love the dog tag idea with the Bible verse on it, because they would think, I mean, I could their muscles would get 2 times as big just wearing those, So I love that idea and many other things. But I loved how you talked to the men who maybe they didn't do this right when their sons were 11 and 12, and man, it feels heavy. And so, how you said, hey, let's just go back to your son and hey, can we do something now? Right. I love you. Right. Let's go get coffee. I want to talk to you. Right. Because I wanted to ask you, for the man who feels he hasn't led well, up to this point, right? Well, maybe some steps he could take today. And you mentioned some, but is there anything else that maybe you would say to him that, man, just feels like, well, I've already missed it?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. One is that my sons have been bold enough and courageous enough to tell me that, Dad, when you start lecturing me, I stop listening. And so that's a kick in the gut, because for me, lecture is a fine way to share information with them, but we also know that lecture is the least effective means of educating folks, teaching. And so I would say, if you're a dad who wants to go back and do some course correction and make up for some lost time, ask a lot of questions and shut up. Just pray that the Lord would give you self-control to keep asking questions and do what you should be doing. We all should be doing with our wives, and that's say, tell me more. And just ask open-ended questions and let guys talk. resist the urge to solve problems or to tell them what went on or make excuses. Just love them by listening. I think that's a big deal.
Mm.
The other thing that I would say is if your son's not available, because I deal all the time with guys who come up to me and say, well, I've got kind of a prodigal situation, Mike, and I don't know what to do. I really am uncertain about how to connect with my son or my daughter. But most of the time I'm talking about sons. And so my advice to those guys is to never stop praying. The prodigal father was constantly watching for the son to return. And so he never gave up. And when he did see the son, it says a long way off. He saw the son a long way off. So he was looking, he was scanning the horizon, and he ran to his son. So I think to have that heart posture is a big deal. But I'll tell you one other thing that's not in the scripture, but I think is valuable. It seems to have borne some fruit over the years. Look for another young man that you can invest in, because chances are there's some young men around you that are on the opposite end of the situation that you're in with your son, and they may not have a great relationship with their dad. And here's one of the things that you and I probably both know. There are times in my life when I didn't want to listen to my dad, but I would listen to another man. There are times in my son's lives when my sons didn't want to listen to me, but they would listen to another man. And so pray that someone would intercept your son, but while you're doing that, be the answer to another man's prayer. Because someone may be praying for the guy who changes your oil at Jiffy Lube. Someone may be praying for the guy who cuts your grass. Someone may be praying for the guy who lives in the apartment down the street. I don't know. But somebody could be praying for another man that's in your orbit, that you could get to know that young man, hear his story, buy him a cup of coffee, buy him a meal, and learn a lot more about your own son as you hear from him, and learn some things about how to connect with your own son. So that's just another strategy here.
Speak to the wife's role in that process.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting question. I don't deal with wife's roles an awful lot, but I would say never give up praying. And this may be a little bit uncomfortable, but moms, sometimes you can lean in too far and you can hold on too tightly, and you can become a barrier to a son growing up because you want to keep holding on to your little boy. And you have to recognize honestly that what you really want is a man, not a boy. As a matter of fact, Stacy and I, my wife is more athletic than I am, very robust and great athlete. And when our boys hit the teenage years and their muscles started getting solid, and boy, she was a little bit offended that they were becoming stronger than she was. And just a whole variety of things that she was noticing, and she was lamenting the fact that the boys are growing up. And I said, well, Stacy, this is, don't forget, we're raising men. We want to raise men. And I would say to her, often through tears, that there will be a day when you need a man to stand beside you, and I will not be available. But we're raising three who will be at your side, reliable, focused, God honoring, I hope, and they will care for you. You don't need a boy in those situations. You need men. So moms, pray and work and release and work together with your husband to raise men, not 30-year-old boys.
Mm. Well, that's good. That's good right there. Mike, thank you so much. Wow.
You're welcome.
One last question.
Yeah.
As we're running low on time, unfortunately, I think, man, I could ask you so many questions for hours. I feel like, but if you could challenge, say, every man listening today with, say, one clear step forward
Yeah.
becoming more like Christ, or maybe helping their sons become more like Christ? Either way, what would that be?
Yeah, I think I'll say this. I was going to catch this a little while ago. You mentioned accountability earlier, and I agree with you. Every man needs accountability in his life. We need some Nathans in our lives, like David had Nathan that came to him and said, "You are that man. You've done wrong here." But part of what I find is that most guys don't. They're not going to raise their hand and say, "Yeah, yeah, sign me up for accountability." It just doesn't happen very easily. And so I've come up with some different language for that. And what I tell guys is, if I do life by myself, I'm in a dangerous place. And so I need some wise men around me. I need some wise guys. And so have been meeting for about 18 years on Friday mornings at a local Panera with a couple of guys that I call my wise guys, because I need wisdom in my life.
Mm.
And so, guys, if you're listening to this, I tell you, if you do not have some men who know you from the inside out and from the outside in and can call your bluff and can read your face and read your body language, then begin this week to meet regularly at a time of your choosing. Get around the word, get to know a guy that will share wisdom with you. Part of what happens with me and these guys is we've been together so long. We've dealt with high school sweethearts. We've dealt with when do we get cell phones? We've dealt with teaching kids how to drive. We've dealt with college rejections. We've dealt with sports. We've dealt with girlfriends. We've been to weddings. We've seen children. We have done life together. And as I tell guys about that, guys look and say, "Boy, I sure wish I had some friends like that." Well, start this week and meet with a couple of guys, get a cup of coffee, have a biscuit. It doesn't have to be fancy, but just begin to do life together, because you need some wise men in your life that are going to help you make sense of the chaos that Satan wants to keep your head swirling in. And so we need to surround it. As a matter of fact, that's the mission statement that I encourage many churches to adopt: is every man connected with other godly men. Just surround yourself with some wise guys so that you don't keep making them same mistakes you've always made. So,
Wow.
and then your kids are going to watch that and they're going to want to do that. So how's that?
That's perfect, man. Mike, I'm so grateful for your faithfulness over the last 20 years, right? The way you've helped men and it really helped them stay grounded around what really matters. And just our conversation today is, man, just express that in so many ways. So very grateful for you, your time, your ministry. The more I've gotten to know about it, just more recently. But tell the listeners as well, about Noble Warriors, what that is, how
Yeah.
they can get in touch with you and learn more about you as well.
Yeah, so Noble Warriors is a ministry. We focus primarily on the state of Virginia, helping churches in Virginia disciple men. So our mission statement is that we serve churches as they equip men to walk with Christ and lead well. So our customer truly is the local church. We want to work with pastors and men's ministry leaders in the local church to help them effectively, intentionally, strategically disciple men, not just have men's events, but to see men transformed by the knowledge of Christ, by the submission to Christ as Lord of their lives, to see men become a new creation. The old is gone, the new has come, if any man is in Christ, as 2 Corinthians 5:17. So we want to see the church doing that work. I never want Noble Warriors to be someone's church excuse. I want the guys to be connected with the local church. So noblewarriors.org is our website. You can find a lot of information there. We have a podcast where I'm talking about that constantly. We just finished some conferences, but we'll be doing an event in August down in Chesapeake that should be a pretty cool experience with Better Man. And I'm accessible. If you shoot something, there's an opportunity to connect with us via email on that website. So if you shoot us something there, then happy to do whatever we can to help and serve the local church to disciple men. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mike.
Hey, it was great to be with you, Whitney. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. It's a blessing to be with you, and I just pray that some of what's said here is useful in the lives of some of the men who listen. So thanks for the opportunity.